I think I would have self-shamed less if I had been a blubbering mess. I think that culturally, it would have been more appropriate if I'd just been crying all the time, because that's kind of what chicks do.
Yeah.
So being angry I was dealing with a lot of conflicting feelings around that, because it was kind of not socially appropriate for a female to be, so furious. We kind of associate that aggression and all of that with men. So I think the anger is definitely related to the PTSD.
Hello and welcome to Beyond Diagnosis, a podcast to raise your awareness, decisions, and voice for alternative practices so you can take back control of your health. I'm Rita De Michele, your host, a mindset and empowerment coach, and the founder of the Onus platform. Join me each week so you can create the health of your dreams. I know you have a personal story to share, and before we talk about that, I'd like to know a little bit more about what you do, why, and how you help people move forward in life. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Thanks, Rita, for having me on. It's lovely to be back podcast guesting after a bit of a break. So let's jump right in. What do I do?
Please.
How do I help people? I mean, look, I've been in business for myself for coming on around about eight to 9 years. And over that time, things have evolved.
They have.
As you know, we should, right? We're all supposed to evolve and grow and change. So in terms of what I do, I now speak about being a rockstar strategist. And for me, what that means is that I've realized my superpower in my strange little brain is I tend to see the world from a different perspective. I tend to see problems, issues, challenges from a different perspective to a lot of people. And I think I probably self-identified for most of my 43 years as a weirdo because of that. And it's only, the last couple of years that I've realized this is an advantage. This is something that's actually really cool, that people can come to me with an issue or a problem or a challenge. And my funny little brain likes to turn it, upside down and sideways. And what if we look at it from that angle? And so that's what I mean by a strategist, is because it's a bit more about like pulling apart a problem, looking at all the pieces, and then putting back together into a picture that suits the client better, right? So whether that's in their business or in their life, basically people come to me when they think, usually this is what I get. God, Lisa, I'm tearing my hair out. I've looked at this every which way and I can't figure it out. Here's the problem. And they present the problem and they think that they've looked at it from every angle. But like all of us, we can only see things from our own perspective, our own points of view, our own life.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I will ask great questions and pull the topic or the issue apart and look at it from different angles and ask questions about whatever it is from those different angles. And what I find happens is that I get the response of, oh, I never thought about it like that. I've never looked at it from that angle. I never considered it from that point of view. And when we do that, when my clients get the opportunity to see the issue or the challenge from a different perspective, a whole department in their brain
opens up, I bet. Yeah.
And they have new solutions that they never considered because they weren't looking at the problem that way.
So do you feel that then you open them up to a whole lot of other possibilities? So actually what you're doing is exposing them to possibilities that they didn't even know existed, or because we all sort of view life in a bit of a tunnel, don't we, until we shine our light a lot further, light brighter.
And we get used to the way that our world works, right? Our world view, level of comfort and familiarity in that. And unless we're really challenged or pushed towards the edges of that, whether you go and do that deliberately and go and walk on hot coals at Tony Robbins or something like that and push yourself out of
Out of your comfort zone.
normal environment. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Or there is a life instance, whether it's a relationship breakdown or a job ending or whatever it is, that also is going to push you beyond that zone of familiarity. I tend to not call it the comfort zone because people will stay there even if they're uncomfortable. So I tend to refer to it as the familiar zone.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
It's very powerful to stay there because it's familiar and it feels safe, even if a lot of the times it is uncomfortable or there's things happening that you don't particularly like. We fall into that kind of better the devil you know sort of situation where we're like, well, yeah, my relationship's not great, but at least I know how to handle the other person. Whereas if I leave, there's a whole bunch of unknown. Way more terrifying.
Wouldn't you say, Lisa, sorry to cut you off, but wouldn't you say that, we both know that the subconscious mind dictates everything, so that subconscious mind of keeping us safe, keeping us within our boundaries, keeping us within what we know is what's stopping them from getting out of that familiarity zone, as you call it, to that scary unknown, because that's the whole thing, isn't it? We always perceive it as scary, but it's not necessarily scary. It's just the unknown.
Unknown. Yeah, unfamiliar, 100%. I think that it's important to acknowledge that human beings are deeply, deeply wired for safety.
Yeah.
In our DNA, we know what
evolutionary,
berries we shouldn't eat because they might kill us. It goes way, way back. We don't want to risk upsetting the tribe because being in the tribe and the village keeps us safe rather than if we're on our own. So there's a lot of behaviors into 2023. I mean, you couldn't, it is obviously the furthest we've been since cavemen and running from saber-toothed tigers, but the programming, the base operating system programming
is still there.
Not that dissimilar. Except now our challenges are if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're not, Google it, people. It's that safety, it's that bottom rung of, am I financially safe? Is my housing stable? Do I have enough food on the plate? There's a level of safety and stability that drives us, but we're not running from tigers anymore. We want to make sure that we keep our job. So sometimes we keep quiet in a shit situation at work because it's important to keep the job, or relationships, or housing situations,
or friendships, or anything really, isn't, or even like this show really does focus on health. Yeah. So I find that a lot of people won't go outside of their, what you call, familiarity zone or their comfort zone to seek out those different options, especially when it comes to a functional, integrative, alternative that may give them an answer to what they're seeking, because of that fear, because of the unknown, because we're so wired for that safety, and we've been told that, there's only one stream in the medical system that you should actually be working with. That's the whole essence of this show, is trying to open up, like, from people like you who obviously work with people's mindset in trying to open them up to try something new.
Yeah, I'm all about mindset and emotional well-being. And physical well-being. I think it's really interesting to reflect on the culture with which you've grown up in. So I personally grew up in a very Western medical model type household. My father is a doctor. My uncle was a doctor. My mum was in the medical field. I was an ambulance paramedic. It was very much in that Western medical model. That was the environment I grew up in. Whereas people that grow up, I think, with a bit more exposure to things like traditional cultures, whether it's Ayurvedic culture from an Indian background, or people that grow up with, their grandparents making things because they have a culture of traditional Chinese medicine. I think depending on what you're exposed to, determines what comes within the boundaries of that familiar zone. So for people like you and I that grew up very Western in terms of,
Yes.
you're sick, you go to the doctor. If you need to talk to someone, you see a psychologist. These are the options. That's it. Then for us, functional medicine, integrative medicine, Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, all these other options lay very much outside that familiar zone for sure.
Yeah, definitely they do. And one of the things I find, and I don't know if you find it in your work as well, is the fear around people using these other options, because they always rely back on it's not proven, it's not scientific, it's not. But if it's been going for thousands of years in these cultures, for me that is proven. Like they've gone through all the testing. Unfortunately, their testing was like maybe people dying, but they've gone through a lot, and they've shown that it works. So yeah, for me it's very much about wanting people to see what else is available to them, and just not accept. Don't just accept what you're being given. Don't just accept that you may have a diagnosis or you may have a condition and you're given this or that, and that's it. Or there may not be an answer and you get the old just live with it.
Yeah, I heard a quote years ago. I'm pretty sure it was Deepak Chopra, and what he said was, so he's a medical doctor, but he's obviously got a very spiritual aspect to
yeah, he's amazing.
And he said you can accept the diagnosis without accepting the prognosis. And so the diagnosis is, here's what's wrong with you, this is what you've ticked the box for, or this is what your tests show. And the prognosis in medical terms is, this is how it's going to be now from here on out. And so I think that really hit home for me, that it's okay to go, okay, cool. So I've got X condition or, whatever it is, this diagnosis, but I'm going to question the authority of the prognosis. So I can accept, at the time, back in 2013, 2014, I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, depression, and I accepted the prognosis immediately, which was, well, this is it. This is you now. I was 34.
Yeah.
And was basically told, this is it. The best you can do is take your medication, hope we get the medication balance right, and it doesn't, the side effects don't too much, and try and avoid your triggers and live the best life you can. At 34, at the time, I had a 2-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And I accepted it. And I went, okay, well, if that's, that's the deal. And I sat on the couch for about 3.5 months trying to be that person. Okay, well, this is me now. I'll just sit here and watch Netflix. And I have referred to that period as I was really like a shell of Lisa. Those cicada shells after the insect
has left
away, and it looks like a cicada, but if you grab it and crush it, it's hollow. So I certainly looked like Lisa on the couch, or I looked like Mum on the couch, but I really wasn't there. I wasn't present. I wasn't engaging with my family. I was a husk of Lisa, in the shape of Lisa on the couch.
I absolutely love that analogy. Lisa, do you feel that the medication that you were given was that the side effects of the medication, or do you feel it was just the overall feeling from the depression, the anxiety, or was it a combination, do you feel?
Yeah, it's a good question. So by that point, I'd been on antidepressants for nearly 10 years anyway. So it's kind of hard to remember a baseline, I guess. All I can speak to is my experience, which was that for me, some symptoms I think or some experiences I was having were like the condition, so to speak. So my primary PTSD symptom was anger. I was very angry at everyone all the time, mostly at myself. I actually broke bones in this hand punching the pantry door once, kicked a hole in the wall in the bedroom, very angry. And it was really confronting, I think, particularly as a woman, to be dealing with that level of rage and anger. I think I would have self-shamed less if I had been a blubbering mess. Like I think that culturally, it would have been more appropriate if I'd just been crying all the time, because that's kind of what chicks do.
Yeah.
So being angry I was dealing with a lot of conflicting feelings around that, because it was kind of not socially appropriate for a female to be, so furious. We kind of associate that aggression and all of that with men. So I think the anger was definitely related to the PTSD.
Sure.
For me, when I came off my medications, some things definitely disappeared, primarily just that brain fog, just complete. So I used to talk about, it felt like my head was full of cotton wool, and it was really hard to think through that. And I didn't have clarity, and I didn't have energy, and it was just, everything was just very cloudy and muddy. Coming off the medication, when I did that fog lifted. So in my own experience, which is all I can speak to, I suspect that was a result of some of the medications I was on, as opposed to the underlying conditions that I was being medicated for.
Yeah. And going back to when you said about being a shell of yourself, so that's a really hard place for people to be in, and then to think about getting themselves out of it, to then take themselves off medication, to have the courage to try something different. So can you sort of speak to that? Like, how did you find that internal strength to be able to do that? Because most people just, and I say that, like we were saying, they're too afraid to even change doctors, even if it's still within the traditional medical, let alone go to someone functional or alternative. And yet here you are at that state, and you've transitioned to a whole new state. Can you kind of elaborate on what you had to go through to make that happen?
Rita, if I knew what got me off the couch, I would bottle it and I'd be selling it.
You'd be a millionaire now.
Yeah, $64 million question. And I've been asked that on many podcasts before, how did you get off the couch? And I guess having an understanding now of human behavior, humans are reasonably simple creatures. We like to think we're very complex, but we're actually kind of simple in that we either move towards something or we move away from something. And that's essentially how our motivation works. So we either move towards something, we're drawn to it, we're like, that looks great, I'm going to go for that. Or we move away from, we go, I don't want any of that. I'm moving this way, right? And again, it's very primal, right? We
absolutely
we keep our distance from fear because from fire, because we know we'll get burnt, right? So it's that moving away from motivation. And often what people think is that they need to find something that's a moving towards motivation to get started, to do a thing. I have to know my purpose. I have to set a goal. I have to know where I'm headed. When in my experience and my recommendation would be, if you know what you don't want, just start moving the opposite direction. So for me, I had no idea that I would end up doing coaching training. I had no idea about, obviously, the years that have followed and all the things that I've done since. No clue. The future for me was pitch black. I had no idea. All I knew, sitting on that couch and having my family kind of rotated around me. My husband made sure the kids had lunch for school and they had clean uniform, and the world kept moving, and they would sort of drop in and give me a kiss on the cheek and say goodbye and whatever, but I really wasn't engaged.
Yeah.
And all I knew was, this is not okay. this is not the mother I want to be. Like I said, I had a 2-year-old at the time, and he would come up and curl up with me on the couch and ask if I was feeling better. And I was just like, do you know what? When he's 10, I don't want this to be our relationship. Like this is not when I fought when I advocated with my husband to have a child, this was not the mothering that I envisioned. I was like, well, this is not good enough. Like this life of sitting on the couch and trying to find something to watch and distract myself from my world and being disconnected from my family. All I knew is this what's happening right now, this is not okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going or what I'm going to do or how it's going to pan out, but I don't want any more of this. So I need to get up and figure out a way to do not this, whatever that is. And very often that away from motivation is the thing that will kickstart somebody's movement, even if they're really not clear on, I didn't sit down and write a list of, goal. I didn't get a planner and do my SMART goals. There was none of that. I just went, this is shit and I hate it and it's not okay. And my family deserves better and my kids deserve better. And I did it initially for them before I could do it for myself.
That's usually the way, isn't it? Especially as a mum, I find.
Especially
I find that I've changed so many things and so many ways of doing things and really have done so much. Like I did a lot of work on myself before, but really ramped it up once I had my son, because, they're usually the ones that you look at and you think, who do I want to be and what do I want to be for them? How do I want to show up, for them?
question. How do I want?
How do I want to show up? So you really start, I think it starts off as an extrinsic motivation, but then you have to build that intrinsic motivation to keep it going. What is that? What happened for you?
Yeah, I guess that extrinsic kept me going for a long time.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely a few years of showing up, because I was very conscious of the parent that I was being and the partner that I was being, and caring about those people and wanting them to have a better experience of me. That absolutely was the drive for a good long time, probably until it was pointed out to me that I was doing it for them. And then an awareness, like, because that wasn't conscious, right? And then an awareness was brought to me that you also deserve this. All the work you're doing, all the bettering you're doing, all the growth and development you're doing, and the weekend after weekend and day after day at trainings and, learning all the things that I was learning and all of that, that this can't just be about them, and it's okay for you to want it for yourself as well. And
Absolutely.
that's when I started exploring what are those blocks, right? Why is it easier for me to do it for them than it is for me to do it for myself? And what is that about, right? And that's all that mothering / martyrdom that most of us got modeled to us by our mums, right? Like my mum still puts herself last and everyone else has to have food on the table before she'll come and plate hers up, like that was shown to me as how you mother and how you love is by making yourself the lowest priority and doing everything for everybody else first. And so having that awareness brought to me allowed me to then go on a journey of challenging all of that and working out, what do I want to keep from that programming? What's useful? And what can I get rid of?
Absolutely, because that is a very familiar song, isn't it? That's how I was brought up as well. It's a very, and I think, like our sort of generation, it was very much still a strong aspect of that mothering. It's all for the other. I think it'll be really good to let people know, was it a form of, did that move into sabotage is what I'm trying to say here. Do you feel that moved into sabotage, or do you feel it was just more about people pleasing?
Yeah, interesting. Great question. I think there was definitely, like, I was an excellent and probably still am a very high level people pleaser. I do want, the people around me to be happy and all that stuff. I guess where my line is, where my boundary is of what I'm willing to compromise in myself to achieve that people pleasing outcome has shifted greatly over the few years. And I think to some extent I held myself back. And perhaps my progress may have been over a shorter time frame. I might have got to where I was going quicker if I'd sort of gone all in, so to speak. And, well, you kids can sort out your own lunch. I'm just going to do this for myself. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Like, I don't look back and think, oh, I wish I'd done that, because the experiences I've had, like, everything is growth and learning, right? But yeah, I guess if I had just checked out and taken myself off to an ashram in India and, gone and meditated for 6 months, then maybe the whole process would have been sped up. Would have come back, 2 years earlier than it took me and gone, oh, I'm where I want to be now. But everyone's on their own, everyone's on their own journey, right? We walk our own path.
Absolutely. You only know what you know at the time. And we only do what we do from what we've known. So, yeah, I mean, I would have done it very similar to you. And I did go through certain things and I did do it very similar to you. So what sort of, what did you do? What's some specific things that you can share with the audience that you did that really propelled you onto that path from getting off the sofa to where you are now?
Yeah, it was all very at the time. At the time, I still believed in coincidence, which I don't now. But it was all very sort of serendipitous. So what I sort of talk about, if you imagine a pond with lily pads on it, and I'm the frog, and I sort of hop from lily pad to lily pad. And what I find in my life is when I'm on my path, so to speak, and I'm moving in flow and I'm going the direction that I'm, call it whatever you want, the universe, God, whatever wants me to go, or I'm serving my soul purpose, or whatever language you want to put around it, what tends to happen is the next lily pad will pop up and I go, oh, well, that's easy. Okay, I'll just pop and I'll do that. And then the next one will pop up and I jump on the next one. And it tends to just sort of flow. When I find myself sitting there going, where do I jump next? Or this is really hard, or, obstacles come up, or I'm sitting and I'm waiting for someone else to sort of, they'll get back to me and I'm twiddling my thumbs. Often that, to me, I interpret that as this is not the path for me, right? So I had a very lily pad to lily pad kind of experience from the couch. I ended up speaking to someone. I'd primarily been the main breadwinner prior to being diagnosed and not being able to work anymore. And so I was concerned about paying bills and all that sort of stuff. So I got involved with a group that was, selling some face cream products or whatever. And they were like, this is a great way to make money. And I went, all right. And I went along and very quickly determined that was not the path for me. But what it did was connect me to a group of people that had entrepreneurial thinking, and a group of people that were of the mindset that if you want something to happen, then you make it happen, as opposed to sitting there, waiting for the arrival of, I don't know, Tats Lotto win, or, I'll just wait here for magic to come to me. So it was a mindset shift now, being around a new group of people.
Right.
Basically 3 lily pad pop-ups later, I found myself at a school, a life coaching school place that did training. And I went along for a weekend and did 2 days and thought, oh, okay, well, this is this is interesting, and I've been challenged, and okay. And then I went along to the following weekend and was strongly challenged again. Because I was at that time, I was very, what's the word, defensive of my victim status. I had PTSD, I had fibromyalgia, my body was sore all the time, I had gastric issues, and I remember sitting in the classroom with my arms folded,
no one's going to help me.
read the body language. Yeah. And, I'm angry and I'm tired and I'm sore and my life is hard and I gave all I had to that career and I've been screwed over. And, these were my narratives. And the lady at the front of the room, the trainer, and she said, are you happy with your life? And I'm like, no, it sucks. And she said, what do you want? What do you want your life to be? I was like, well, I don't want to be angry and I don't want to be tired and I don't want to be in pain anymore and I don't want this and I don't want that. And she sat and she listened and she nodded, or she stood there and listened and nodded, and okay. And she said this one sentence. She said to me, so I have a very clear idea of what you don't want. What do you want instead? And it was like someone had hit me in the face with a brick, because what I realized is that I had not attributed any time, I'd not allocated any time to thinking about what I wanted and what I wanted my life to be and what I wanted things to look like and how I wanted to feel in my body. I was absolutely fixated on what I don't want. And as I now understand it, what you fixate on is what you see more of, what you program your brain to give you more of,
you get
more of, and you get more of it. So I was getting all the things I didn't want. I'm angry, I'm sore, I'm broke, and so that's what life was serving me. And I came to that realization from her question that I had not at all considered the opposite. And that was really a turning point for me to start working out what that looked like. What does that look like? How do I want to feel? Oh my God, what would I like to do for a job? Where would I want to live? Oh, wow, right? Just like a possibility bomb got dropped on me, and all I had was options. Oh, wow, the world is a much bigger place than this list of things I don't want that are making me miserable. Oh, that's quite a different perspective. And so from then, I basically did every course that this school offered at the time. So I did my neuro-linguistic practitioner training. I did neuro-linguistic programming master practitioner training. I did behavioral, what's it called? Human behavior qualifications and everything they had.
You did.
I was like, tell me.
Give it to me. I'm ready.
How to run workshops, how to, hypnosis, like all the things. I was like, great. So I've got a big book of all my certificates because I did everything that at the time they had on offer over about an 18-month period. And it was actually at the end of that 18 months. So by this time, it's about November 2015. I was just about to embark on a 10-day intensive master practitioner of NLP program. Mm-hmm. For anyone that's done this, you will know it's messes with your head, is what I'll say.
I've actually done it, so I actually understand.
Yeah. So practitioner training in NLP, I guess, gives you a structure and a framework, and it sort of teaches you the rules in inverted commas, and then master practitioner smashes that wide open and breaks all the rules. Yeah. So, it's very next level. The day before I was due to show up, so we started on the Saturday, and Friday prior, the day before, I had been considering ceasing my medication. So at that point I was on antidepressants and the pill and some other tablets. I don't really remember now, but a few.
Yes.
And I'd really weaned them down like I was on one every second day already. Like I was pretty low dosing, most of that stuff anyway. Just, FYI, coming off antidepressants is absolutely something you want to do slowly and potentially guided by someone, a doctor, because it can be really tough on your body and your mind. I would not recommend anybody just cold turkey off these things. So I had already whittled it down. And the day before, the pharmacy where I used to fill my scripts burnt down.
Oh, God, of course.
So Rita, I had no choice but to take it as a sign from the universe
that you needed to stop. You needed to stop.
It was time to try life without tablets. And like, I will only ever advocate that was the right decision for me at that time. And I'd been doing a lot of work since then. I don't, like I said, I don't recommend anyone just sort of chuck them in on a whim. It's really got to be a very considered decision. But that was, for me, that was like, oh, okay, well, maybe now's a good time.
It's a sign.
And then I started my 10 days of master practitioner when my head was exploded. And wow.
For people that don't understand what NLP or master practitioner is, do you want to just give a little synopsis on that, about the mindset changes that they teach? Well, not necessarily about what they teach, but how you did that to change your beliefs, to change the way you were thinking, to change your headset, so you could move forward. So just a little note on what NLP gave you, or what it is and what it gave you.
Yeah, great question. So I've since become an NLP trainer further down the line, so I should be able to answer this quite technically. Look, ultimately for me, my interpretation is that neuro-linguistic programming is a set of philosophies and techniques, or philosophies and processes that provide a framework for the way that you look at the world and the way that you interact with the world.
That's right.
So, it's a tool. I know that there are a lot of people that are fearful of NLP, or they're there's some negative feelings towards it, or it's got connotations of being manipulative and whatever else. I would say I refer to it as a tool, like a hammer. And I think I said this to you when we had our chat, right? So NLP to me is a tool like a hammer. If I hand it to one person, they can build a cubby house for their kids with a hammer. If I give a hammer to another person, they can, knock someone's block off and rob them, right? But it's not the hammer's fault, right? A hammer's just a hammer. So a tool, or a set of tools in neuro-linguistic programming, is just that, and how it's chosen to be used and applied and all of that stuff, that comes down to things like individual integrity and intention, and stuff like that. So what I found really profound when I did my first practitioner training in NLP, so there's essentially two levels: there's practitioner and master practitioner, and then you go on and do trainer training and whatnot. What I guess was profound for me was that I was very set in my point of view of the world. Like I said, arms folded. Here's all the reasons that I'm miserable, and I'm justified in my misery. And at the same time, I wish I wasn't, and that's what I was that's what I came in with, was this belief system, a set of beliefs that was making me miserable. And that NLP training, the first time I did prac, I definitely recommend doing it more than once, was the first time that anyone had even suggested that your beliefs could be changed, that the way that you view your world is not actually objective. I hear a lot of people talk about reality, right? Well, the reality is, and I'm like, well, the reality is a little, more fluid than people like to think. Like we said before, right? We've got our program, we've got our familiar zone, we've got our safety bubble, we've got the way we see the world, and that becomes our reality and our truth, right? This is the way the world works. Everybody's out for themselves. Money is the root of all evil, right? We've got all these stories.
That's right.
And that becomes your truth in your world. And sitting in that room for the first time and having somebody explain up the front, both, I guess, philosophically and somewhat, neuroscientifically, NLP being born out of the positive psychology movement in the 1960s. So they talk about how the actual neurology of your neurons firing together and wiring together, and how we come to believe what we believe, and those sorts of things. That's the first time anyone had said any of that to me. I'd never read a book about any of that sort of stuff, never heard a podcast, never watched a video on YouTube. So it was the first time that I was introduced to the idea that I had choice, and that if there were things that I wanted to change in my life, it wasn't about sitting there and waiting for them to change. It was about me changing, and then that would create the change that I wanted to see in my life.
Exactly. What I find interesting, and maybe the listeners will too, is the fact that you recognize that you have anxiety, depression, and fibromyalgia, and you found a tool that helped you. So that's the key. You were talking before about people who really own something, and I've spoken to a lot of people who really own their health condition. It's almost like a badge of honor. They wear it as a badge of honor.
Yeah, it becomes their identity.
It becomes their identity. So it's once you made that transition and you said, no, I'm going to find a tool to help my mindset, to help me move forward with this. Did you find that your health changed? Did you find that maybe your fibromyalgia was impacted positively? Did you find that your depression and anxiety was like hand in hand with your health? So by changing your mindset, changing to go and do something different, letting your subconscious know that I'm more than this, I can do something for myself. Did you feel that in your body? Did you feel that change in your body?
Yeah, I probably can't speak specifically to the time frame, but I absolutely know somewhere within those 18 months, not only by November 2015 was I medication free post pharmacy burn down.
Congratulations.
But I was also PTSD symptom free. And what I mean by that is I no longer tick the boxes. So no flashbacks, no nightmares, no hypervigilance, all the other things that you sort of need. There's a lot of categories around it. I no longer tick those boxes. In terms of my fibromyalgia, like I said earlier, in my own experience, my chronic fatigue, whatever you want to call it, essentially a full body inflammatory response.
Yes.
For me, that cleared up, that healed in the same time frame as I healed my mental health. So
Interesting.
The equivalence that I then created, my truth became that my fibromyalgia was a physical manifestation of my poor mental health state. And so when I addressed that, when I changed how I was thinking, I changed how I was speaking to myself, I changed the feelings I was feeling on a day-to-day basis, I changed the language I was using, I changed how I was speaking to other people, I changed how I was speaking to myself. Through all of that, I was in less pain. I stood up taller. I can't remember. I may have lost some weight over that period of time. There was definitely, for me, a very strong mind, body, spirit.
I was going to say, that's a real testament to the mind, body, spirit, isn't it? How they influence each other. The body can influence the mind, and the mind can influence the body. What's happening in the body, like if you have, digestive issues, if you have unfavorable bacteria, all of these can influence our mind. but our mind can definitely switch on and switch off, genes, that are happening in the body, for a
Yeah.
more positive
To
result.
Yeah, I think to any for like I said, I can only speak on behalf of myself. For me, any framework or rule book or philosophy that creates a separation between mind and body um, is missing part of the picture. So I guess that's where, coming back to health and the medical model versus alternative health streams, that was probably part of my issue with the medical model, is that the doctors, the gastroenterologists, all the specialists, the rheumatologists about my inflammation, everyone that I saw, it was all very siloed. It was all very
Independent.
disconnected from everything else. And no one ever asked me any questions about how I was feeling or what I think on a day-to-day basis, or how do I speak to my body? What is my relationship with my body? Which, was then and, could be better now, but was pretty negative, right? So I had a
Yeah.
lot of hate towards my body, right? I hate my body because it hurts. I hate my body because I can't trust it to do what I want. I can't lift my kid up. I can't, and so there was a lot of negativity towards my body. But to not appreciate that's part of you, and you're just having a good old rough crack at
Yes.
yourself, right? It becomes this self-fulfilling negative cycle. So that was part of, I think, that identified for me. I saw this specialist, I saw that specialist, I wasn't getting any better. But to me, it made no sense that we weren't looking at me as a whole person in terms of trying to
That's the
get
key.
well. And that kind of was like, okay, well, I've grown up in, medicine and paramedicine. I went to uni and I studied anatomy and physiology and I have a bachelor's, and, that's the world I came from. But in this healing journey, I recognized that world couldn't give me the answers I was looking for. It couldn't take me to that next level. It ended at diagnosis. Well, this is what you've got. You've got fibromyalgia. Tick, I'm done. I told you what's wrong with you. I was like, well,
That's right.
how do I get better? What happens next? Oh, that's it. That's what you've got now. And it was almost like their focus was on diagnosis rather than healing. And so for healing, I had to go elsewhere and look elsewhere for, well, how do I not have this? I'd really like to not have that. And I used to say to people, I spent 32 years of my life without PTSD. I spent, 2 to 3 years with it. And then I went back to not having it again. Like, this is, I wasn't born with it. This isn't my natural state.
Yes.
I wanted it to be, a blip rather than, oh, well, this is who you are now.
And so did your fibromyalgia, was that a result of your PTSD? Did that come from that? Or did you have that before? Or was that from the stress?
Look, I think it's very muddy for me. It's hard to work out, when did that start? Part of the reason I didn't go down the work cover process was because I was under a lot of mental strain, and I got presented with a piece of paper from my employer saying, what is the date of injury? Like, when did you start getting sick? Because that system is designed around a physical injury, like, oh, I hurt my shoulder, or,
Yeah, absolutely.
and so I was like, do I write my date of employment? Like, when my first fatal car accident, like, what do I put as, when did this start? I don't know, man. Like, it's been, 10 years. Like, I don't have a date that it began, right? So for me to sort of look back now, I was under the impression, as were a lot of people that were helping me, that my PTSD was a result of my ambulance career.
Right. Okay.
And it was because it's not unusual, right? It's not unusual for people in, police, fire, ambulance, military.
You're witnessing a lot of trauma.
it's pretty standard to leave with some sort of mental strain or struggle. So I thought that's what had caused it, so to speak, when I was first diagnosed. And it was only in the unpacking of all of this over the next 18 months to 2 years that I realized that there were other contributing factors. So, I'm a dual rape survivor. I've got intergenerational trauma. All four of my grandparents are Holocaust survivors. There's a lot of stuff leading up to it before I ever put a uniform on that was contributing. So it's all very much in the mix, and the physical aspects of that are just in that kind of jumble. So I don't know whether fibromyalgia symptoms started before I was diagnosed with PTSD or the other way around. I do believe that my physical body manifests what's going on in my head, so to speak. There's definitely a relationship there for me.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing, let's go back to when you were in the hospital, well, when you got a diagnosis from the doctor. And what did you do? Like, you weren't going to just accept that you had this. You want to get back to how you were. You didn't want fibromyalgia. You didn't want PTSD. So how did you decide, and where did you decide to go? Like, what? That's the thing with a lot of people that I think that they're struggling with, that they get a diagnosis and then they're confused. Like, I don't want this diagnosis, but I haven't got much help. I may have all these different diagnoses from different people, but like you say, they're all siloed. And I've been offered medication, which, I don't advocate that people don't do, because a lot of times it's life-saving in the beginning. But is it something that you want to stay on long term? So what was your path then? How did you go about finding someone, and did you find someone that helped you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I remember, like, it was 10 years ago. I think I was had a mentor fallen in front of me, come into my awareness that there was someone who had been on a similar journey. I probably would have latched onto them, like, how did you do it? Show me all the things.
Yeah.
I don't know that I consciously was looking for that. I guess I was lucky in that I just sort of, Rita, I feel like most of my life I've just fallen forwards and managed to catch myself.
Fallen forward and started running.
Yeah, I just sort of tripped forward and managed to get myself upright, and so far so good. So I think there's sort of just it all just kind of worked out. In terms of if people are, they've been given a diagnosis that's less than favorable, or something that, they're not keen on holding on to, or they can, as we said, they can accept the diagnosis, they want to explore a different prognosis. I guess what's changed in the last 10 years since I did it was that we have a huge number of things like Facebook groups, and there's just a much larger body of public information around different options. So there's definitely support groups that you can tap into. There's Facebook groups of people that are going through similar things. I would say put your critical thinking hat on when you are receiving information that's public. So whether it's on Facebook, or you've just gone to Dr. Google, or whatever it is, use your critical thinking hat. Think about, where is this information coming from? How are they qualified to speak to this? And I guess take it all with a grain of salt and filter it through your own assessment of does this ring true for me? Is this not true for me? And not take anything, it sounds a bit cynical, but not just sort of swallow anything whole, you know, like you want to be inquisitive and curious and investigate that.
Was there a particular holistic practitioner or functional practitioner or anyone like that that helped you manage, help you with the pain or to help you resolve, or was it more just around changing your mindset?
Yeah, I've seen so many different
Haven't we all?
therapists and specialists and spent thousands and thousands of dollars testing and and collected more diagnoses, Hashimoto's hypothyroid and hyperparathyroid. I've got a big long list of things that I have or I don't have. I think getting referrals from people is always good. So speaking to family members or friends, and if they can refer you in a direction, if they have spoken to a holistic doctor or a functional medicine doctor or an integrative health specialist or a nutritionist or a naturopath, like it's always good to get those referrals or those connections through someone that's had their own positive experience.
Absolutely.
From that, then investigate, then search them, check reviews, because your friend or your family member's experience may be the anomaly, right? Maybe there's 9 out of 10 people that hate that person that you're thinking of going and seeing. So again, do your research, to use a terrible phrase, but to be curious, I guess. And I think just a quick word about Facebook groups. Be conscious, I guess, of how the energy of the group affects you. If you are on a mission to heal, if you want to get better, if you want to not adopt the diagnosis as your identity, whatever it is, just be very mindful and deliberate in the online groups that you spend time in. So I'll give you context for that statement, which is when I chose not to be defined by my PTSD, essentially I moved from one identity, which was ambulance paramedic, AMBO, and the next available community for me to jump into was broken AMBO, broken cop, right? Which was damaged. You're damaged, you've got PTSD, you can't work, you have to sit on a pension now. And that community of the broken ones, there's people within that very strongly will fight to keep that identity because it's the next closest to their previous tribe. And I get it and I understand why. And they were very resistant to my suggestions that you could potentially get out of that and you don't have to be like this anymore. And they were very protective of that. And I used to call some of those support groups misery circles, and often would refer to it as a race to the bottom. And so there were conversations in there about like who had it worse and this is what I've seen, and well, I haven't slept a good night in 15 years and I've had nightmares every, and they compare their awful experiences as if it was some sort of competition for who's having the worst life. And I identified reasonably quickly that was they're not my people. That's not my identity. It's not what I want and not what I want to be around, and the energy of that. And part of one of the challenges of healing was that I had to let them go. Right? These were my former colleagues. These are people that I can speak to on a level that I can't usually speak to people, right? We all tell each other weird stories. I'll tell you, right? Cops and Nambos and fight. We all tell each other really weird stories. We talk about inappropriate things blood cuts and stuff over dinner. And if you have anyone that's in emergency services or medicine, you know what I'm talking about. Like we were like, oh, I saw this guy with a ripped dog, and just like it's very normal for us to sort of tell each other war stories and things that in polite company are not okay.
Yes.
And part of me recognizing that I wanted to go a different direction and I didn't want this to be my identity and I wanted to heal. One of the challenges was letting go of that community that wanted to stay in, in their misery, in their identity of brokenness. And that can be difficult too. That can be a big hurdle, I think, for people that identify that they do want to heal rather than sit in it. And sometimes that makes you feel like you're going out on your own.
Because, it is scary for people because to give up something, you have to replace it with something else. And, you can't just sit in a void. It's that void that they're feeling. So if I have to give up that group, that community, that tribe, whatever language that people like to use, and it doesn't sit with me because I need to move forward, well, then I'm going to have to replace it with something else. And it's that replacing with something else that I think stumps people from moving forward and finding something else for them and creating a new life and creating better health. It's all those choices that we have to make.
Starting again, like it's a big, a lot of the times it feels like an insurmountable, obstacle. Is it like, well, not only do I have to heal, but I can't talk to my sister-in-law anymore because she's, and there are people that we sometimes have to distance ourselves from because they're not helping. And I think that takes a lot of strength.
It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage.
Yeah. I think it's good now that I certainly think that their new tribe, the group of people that are healing or have healed, or that's far more accessible than it was 10 years ago.
Yes, it is. So to wrap up today, Lisa, it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you. I'd just love to ask you a question. I usually end a lot of these sessions with the same question. Like, do you have a message of hope for someone, walking in your path, that they can arrive to where you've got to?
Yeah. So I think everyone walks their own path. I think there are sections of our paths that overlap and cross over and intersect. And sometimes you can sort of, see someone up ahead.
Yes.
Like, oh, well, they do. I'll follow them for a bit. And then you deviate back onto your own path. Just trust that, I guess, be the frog, keep your eye out for the lily pads that pop up. If it trust your gut. One of the things that I had challenge with when I had a lot of body-based health issues was I really had to rebuild that trust in my body and trusting my gut that things were the right way to go or the wrong way to go. So just learn to sit with things, and you don't always have to make a snap decision. Just really check in with yourself, trust yourself, and as long as you keep taking steps, then you'll get where you want to go. Sometimes those steps are backward steps. Sometimes they're sideways steps, but they're all steps. They're all steps. They're all part of it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Lisa, thank you. It has been such a pleasure. I've loved hearing your journey, and I'm sure everyone else will take some golden nuggets from everything that you've shared today. Thanks so much.
I hope so. Thanks for the opportunity, Rita.
You're welcome. It's been great. I would love to know, what was the biggest insight or aha moment you got from this interview? So you can now speak up, take action, and make informed decisions for your health. And if you like this episode, get instant access to your free ebook, Alternative Wisdom, Taking Back Control of Your Health. at life-onus.com.